everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Glad you guys are sticking around. I'm Ellen Jakowski. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at, like my cards, MasterCard. So hopefully some of you have a MasterCard. I'm joined on the panel by some amazing superstars. We have Will Butler Adams, who is the CEO of Brompton Bicycle with 20 years at the company. He advocates for better infrastructure to foster active travel and cleaner urban environments. Then we have Coco Barer Panaza.
Oh no, she's not here.
Not here.
She's got whooping cough. So
Oh, whooping cough. And you are?
I'm Sasha Newell, so founder of My Wardrobe HQ.
Welcome. And then we have Sophia. So I almost got it right. Sophia Wyatt. She is the co-founder and the co-CEO of the Library of Things, which is a startup that lends out products from drills to sound systems to GoPros from smart barring kiosks. And then we have Dulma Clark. Yes, okay. Dulma is in the house. She is the head of the Live Barefoot Fund at Vivo Barefoot, which focuses on sustainable footwear using recycled materials. So, why is MasterCard on a stage with these amazing innovators? So MasterCard has 100 million points of acceptance in the world where you can all use your MasterCard, over 20,000 banking partners, and 3 billion cards in circulation. So that's a lot of consumption across our value chain. But let's focus on that first piece, those 100 million merchants. We are looking for more merchants like these four on stage, right? Those that are driving a sustainable, regenerative, circular economy. So really excited for our discussion today because I think this is the offering that is now available today, and this is the direction for the future. So we've got a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. In terms of circularity, and I assume the people in the audience know about circularity, right? It's moving from a linear consumption model of take, make, use, dispose to a circular model of reuse, recycling, and keeping all of those materials in the economy in an active way, not in a landfill. So as we move to more circular models that you all have continued to focus on, what are your thoughts on whether you think of your customers as customers or consumers, right? Consuming things, which, that title is interesting. How do you think of the people who you're targeting to use your products and services? So anyone want to start?
Are these on? Oh, yeah. Hi everyone. Really lovely to be here. What an amazing space. It's a really great question for us because we actually really believed in creating a kind of groundswell movement. So Library of Things is a social movement and not just a business. And that started about 10 years ago. And that community feel from the outset meant that everyone was a member of Library of Things, and membership meant that there was more ownership over the idea. So people were more likely to actually start renting. So our whole mission is, we should buy less, share more. And people actually took care of the things, the drills, the pressure washers, the sewing machines, if they felt like they were theirs as well. So it was kind of like a flip of ownership. You don't have to buy it, but you do have to feel like you own it. So members was a really, really key way of us doing that, calling them members.
I love that. Any other thoughts?
I was about to say very similar answer. Just one second piece perhaps we've added to it is that on the community side of things, we work with brands, we also work with individuals. So individuals can rent or buy stock which is supplied to us by brands, or they can list their own items. So that sort of completes that circle in terms of the circularity piece, also makes them feel much more engaged in the business model. If it's not just that they're shopping with their favorite brands, they're also then able to make money themselves by listing their own products on the website.
Well, you mentioned circular. Funny enough, I'm not a big fan of this obsession with circular, because it's as if we have to make something out of something pretty average so we can quickly recycle it and use it again. Actually, I think what we need to be doing is making better stuff that lasts a lot longer, that can be repaired, reused, and then, yes, when it finally comes to the end, you can take it apart and you may be able to use it for other things. But don't start by making something suboptimal and start thinking about how you're going to recycle it. Make something that's going to really last, and it might pass through many hands, as you're doing. I mean, you know, and it's a classic, and it's not fashion, and it's useful, and it lasts for generations, and then finally it dies, and there's a great celebration, and, you know, it's done the world a great service. But we're consuming just way too much stuff. We need to consume way less, better quality stuff, in my humble opinion.
Very much agreed with the humble opinion. It's funny the description that you said, footwear that's made from recycled materials. Recycled materials is not our number one priority. Number one priority is being bomb-proof, how we call it. It's durability. And we have this material matrix that every single product goes through. And even if the design is incredible and we know it's like, you know, people are going to love it, it can be easily dropped off the range if it's not going to hit the durability mark. Anyhow, repair recycling was the first brand in shoemaking. Back in 2018, we started this repair program, Take Back and full-on repair program. Set up a whole brand new setup outside of Leeds, like taking back all our footwear and then repairing them and grading them into different components. And that was kind of crazy to think about it, like how come you know, this doesn't exist in a grand scheme of things, considering footwear business is like 22 billion pairs of shoes made every year. 90% of them end up in landfill within the first year of production. And then they also made, like, you know, from all sorts of crazy stuff. On average, 60 different components could go into one pair of shoes. And as you can imagine, logistical stuff that goes into it as well is like out of control. So, talking about customers or consumers, we never even use that word in the business because it's like, you know, like we're just trying to move away from like normal, I mean, not normal, like capitalist way of seeing things. Our legacy, we come from a Quaker sort of Buddhist community. We're trying to create something that's actually like creates value and regenerative value, how we love calling it. And all our people who come across Vivo, we call them conscious mavericks, people who are on a journey of exploring or would like to share a journey of exploring what makes us human. So like a lot of like brand proposition is all about we are nature, nature is us, and then constantly asking questions like how we can create this intrinsic value and then rebuilding, sort of, like not rebuilding, but reconnecting back to notion what makes us human.
But just asking you a question. I mean, MasterCard, ginormous company, billions of customers. I mean, in theory, we all need to buy less. We need to transact less. We need to consume less. So therefore, your company should get smaller if the world becomes more sustainable, because we buy less stuff, we transact less. I mean, is that something your team are thinking about? Are they thinking about a world where we're not just buying and 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 buying?
I am on this stage for a reason, right? Like I'm here because we're interested. We have to transition to a sustainable regenerative economy. We know this, right? Our company very well understands that that is the future. I mean, that's how I introduced all of you, right? Like this is the future of how we need to consume, or be a member, or be a maverick, or be an individual, as you all have labeled, you know, that type of activity. So, you know, for us though, it's clear for us to stay profitable and grow, which is clearly important, right?
And do we need to keep growing? I mean, why do we have to keep growing? Why don't we just, you know, sustainably coexist? This obsession with growth. At what point do we stop growing? I mean, the planet can't carry on if everybody keeps growing. There's not going to be anything left.
Well, I would go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We all need footwear, right? We all need transport, whether via bicycle or otherwise. So there are things that we will need to have to survive as human beings. So in that sense, I think that's That's kind of the future that we're looking at, is how do we move to that sustainable model? So let's move to,
I was about just to add to that one point.
Yeah.
MasterCard is always going to win, because what we've seen from people that are saving money with renting, buying resale, potentially consuming it less in the fashion world, what they're doing is taking that disposable income and they're actually spending it on experiences. They're traveling, they're going to restaurants, they're supporting the economy, I guess, in a different way. So the consumption is still there. They'll still use their MasterCard to pay.
Exactly. Again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to need to do all these things. So, in terms of how to excite people about this, right? When you look at who you're serving today, the members, the individuals, the mavericks, that population needs to grow, right? Back to your growth. That population to transition, right? We need to get more people interested in these types of products and services. So how are you doing that?
So Library of Things, we first tested how do we get people to share hyperlocally about 10 years ago. Of course, sharing has been going on for absolutely ages. It's not a new thing. I think with all of this stuff, we're packaging it up in ways to make it as desirable as possible to as many people as possible. And we basically realized that if we could spread the concept, and we named it Library of Things for a reason, it says what it does on the tin type name. There are now thousands of them around the world. It's a concept that travels really well. It's a word of mouth thing. It's like you get it immediately what it is. So making it desirable has actually never been the issue. It's in how do you create the operations, the logistics, the circularity, all the sort of supply chains. We work directly, to answer you, Will, with manufacturers to make sure that the items that we lend out are the most durable and also user-friendly. Because actually, often you're trading off between one or the other. It's either designed to be really durable, but not for everyday use or everyday users, which I actually loathe using that term, users, or it's the complete opposite, and it's designed to be used once or twice and then to die. So we very much see Library of Things as being about the prevention of waste. We can't cure waste by doing repairs. We tested. Can we take people's old drills and start renting those out, lending those out? But unfortunately, that's not possible. They will die on you just as quickly as a poorly made thing. So it's really, really important that we work directly with manufacturers. We have really high quality things. We make them really accessible by plugging them into public spaces like libraries, shopping centers, leisure centers. There's one in North Kensington, not too far from here, in the leisure centre there. So it's easily accessible, it's affordable, it's high-quality things that you wouldn't normally be able to afford, and that's what makes people want to use it, not that it's an environmental solution or that it's trying to save the world. It's meeting people where they're already at, which is, I need to put up some shelves this weekend, I need a drill.
I think I probably semi-answered this in the last thing that I said, but yeah, in the end, we have a really single-minded sort of proposition, which is if something exists already, don't go out and find a new one or buy a new one. Find a way of buying it secondhand or renting it. And it's as simple as that. Or subscribe. Even we offer a subscription service which churns clothes over and over again. So lots of people get the experience of newness, but there's no new products being manufactured to sit within that portfolio.
But how are you finding more people to serve in that sense? I guess
well,
that's the
pitch is experience. That is the pitch. By saving money and by reusing existing items that are already out there in the world, you are going to save money, and with that, by saving money, you can have a better life, which is through experiences. And hopefully those have less of an impact on the earth, as long as everyone's not just jumping on a plane, but they will have less of an impact than consistently buying and buying and buying and consuming and having a bad day and shopping on Boohoo, or, you know, what, as we know, people are sort of obsessed with fast fashion and so on. It's a really critical area to slow down. And the way we can slow it down, that down is by saying, you know, it's all about spirit. Life is about experience in the end, not what you've owned.
And Dulma, in the apparel, clothing, footwear business, how are you trying to attract more customers away from the fashion of the day to, the strategy that you're following?
We're very often super sold out people. We do have a lot of customer requests. Why is this size out of stock? Which is probably a good thing, but also it's about growth. We're not trying to outgrow whatever we're producing today. We self-finance the family business, so we're looking at it in a very responsible way, I suppose. But then at the same time, all our comms filter through natural health proposition. We're essentially a brand trying to communicate how we can move naturally, but it's not just stop there, it's more holistic, trying to think what healthy sleeping patterns look like, what the benefits of hot and cold. We have a whole education platform basically called Vivo Health, and we work with natural health educators from different parts of the world looking at parenting to trail running, and we do have a lot of festival sponsorships, but it's all around well-being and natural health, because if you're healthy and well in your own body and mind, and I've been on the other side really badly too, so I can really relate to that, then you can be a really healthy, grounded member of society too, for your family, for community around you, and you can create beautiful services and products that are not just perhaps sustainable, but could go beyond, be regenerative. That's why this whole philosophy of regenerative leadership is something that trickles down across the entire company. We constantly go to a forest outside of London, and then now we, thank God, opening a second office outside of Bristol, spending a lot of time outdoors and walking the talk, and trying to build this healthy community and provide information. Because my husband was extremely ill, and we had to go personally, the family, through all these different options of what is out there and what's healthy, not healthy anymore. The information that is so skewed, and then you don't know who to believe anymore, and then you have to do your own homework. And why is it supposed to be like that? Why things that are actually healthy and good for people and planet, you have to look for it. It should be just normal. And then
and I want to get to that point. I think that's a really important point. But first, the bicycle. I think that's probably, one of the items, right, that is probably most shared today, right? City bikes have just exploded. Every city now you can find a system. So, what's your view on attracting more individuals?
So I think you just need to make something that's better than what currently exists. The reason we all have these rather expensive and don't last very long things in our pockets, not a Nokia, which we started out with if you're my age, is because it's useful. It is actually forms a useful added value. So if you can create something that's actually useful and better than what exists, makes people happy, makes them feel better, saves them money, then you're onto something. After that, you need to, if you genuinely are doing that and not pretending you're doing that, then you let your customers do the talking for you, and let them tell other people. So for us, we're trying to create something, mostly we're obsessed with making something that's useful. We let our customers do most of the talking. We've got about 1.1 million customers floating around. And then I think the other thing that we're forgetting is the environment that we're living in is going to put a lot of pressure on all of us to change how we live. When in Washington at the moment, we opened a store, and I was worrying about Washington that we weren't going to sell bikes because it's minus 10 degrees in winter, and it's a bit chilly on a Brommy at minus 10. But it's 45 degrees in Washington at the moment. People aren't riding bikes because it's too hot. That is messed up. And, so we are going to feel as a society much more pressure. So how we think, how we shop is going to change because the environment in which we are living is going to remind us every day that we can't carry on doing what we did before.
Absolutely. So, Dulma, back to your point. The theory of change that we have at MasterCard about this transition, how do we see this happening? There are 3 pillars to it: inspire, inform, and enable. And for us, inspire is all about how do we help individuals start wanting to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And not just because, to Will's point, it's so hot out, you can't think about doing anything else but, right? we don't want it to get to that point. So how do we start really living into that now? And that's evolving our brand Priceless, so that what priceless means is living a sustainable, fulfilling lifestyle. So we could go into detail about all the Inspire programming and what we're doing with our marketing and working with influencers who have a lot of power over big sections of society who look up to them. How can they be an example for people to start that transition of wanting to live that lifestyle? The second pillar is inform. So to Dilma's point about how do we provide the best credible information that's been assured or checked by an independent third party, so that you know in this sea of information of, oh, this is made of recycled materials. Oh, maybe it's 1% of recycled material, not 100%. Like, how do we cut through all of this so that if you want to make a more sustainable choice, you're informed of what actually is a more sustainable choice? So how are you all informing? Like, talk about, how you handle the competition between maybe other brands that talk about durability or recyclability or whatever, but you may come at it from a different way. So across the...
I mean, I do think, and you were mentioning this earlier, I still think if you start with the sustainability as the starting point, you're probably going to fail. We all care about it deeply, but if you're talking about mass participation, you need to create something that's genuinely making someone's life better. That is the starting point. And deliver something that is a joy, that improves how they go about their lives and frees up time or makes them feel better or saves them a bit of money or whatever it happens to be. The sustainability, I mean, it isn't quite there and there is a lot of fluff, but really that's going to become just the norm. So if you're not on that, you're in trouble. And we're going to go through a bit of a transition where we've got a bike over there with recycled aluminium, when most of the recycled aluminium in the world that's recycled is actually just cut-offs. So it's not true recycling. It's not an old window that you've recycled. It's just a bit of a cut-off that when you're stamping out your shapes, you get a bit of stuff on the floor. That's not real recycle. So you can get into that debate forever, but actually, you just need to make something better because the consumer wants a better experience, and hopefully, we, the people that care about the environment and think about a little bit, and we're not perfect, by the way, succeed more than the people who are polluting the Amazon and doing the other stuff. I mean, it's a bit of a race against time.
Anyone have other comments?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in about the fact that a lot of people that use a library of things are very motivated by saving money. And that's like the primary thing. Then it's about saving them space, actually, because some of the housing stock that we have here in the UK and actually around Europe is some of the smallest in the world. So people don't have storage to store, I don't know, a gazebo or a carpet cleaner or things like this as well. So storage, we kind of show you how much space you're saving by borrowing. We also show how much money you're saving, and then we layer in, okay, you're also saving this amount of CO2 or waste going to landfill. And in a community, like actually in Hammersmith down the road, like 15 tons of waste are saved every couple of months. And we kind of show that on a community level then as well, like you're having a difference collectively. And people really respond to that as well as the money saved piece. So a drill costs about £5 to borrow for a drill for a day. So these are the things that people kind of really like latch onto and are motivated by.
Yeah, the whole sustainability thing is unfortunately become a bit of a gravy train, hasn't it, for a lot of people to make actually a lot of money from. The one thing that sticks in my mind, to your point, was we were looking at some recycled bags, recycled packaging. And we went to a factory who purported to offer that, and they were a bit worried because I think we kind of literally turned up 24 hours after having spoken to them and said, oh, we've come for a meeting to have a look at your processes on how these bags are made. And long story short, they basically kind of made a bag in one factory and then sold it to the factory next door. And at that point, it was recycled because we then bought it from the second factory. So it wasn't anything that that we had been informed it was. So yeah, you just have to. The problem with the state of the world at the moment is the data and the data sources and whether or not the data sources are correct. So we have a sustainability calculator that we apply to every garment that's rented or resold, which will show you how much water was saved from the manufacturing process. And how much CO2 based on where that item was made. But is it perfect? Would I truly hang my hat on, where we write down to the last even 1,000 litres of water? Probably not. But that's because there isn't a source of data that's truly accurate. It's going to become very interesting when companies have to start reporting alongside their company accounts, having to start to report on environmental calculations as well, and that will, I think, change their data sources. And I'm sure there'll be a big, Accenture or PwC or one of the big companies that will get on the back of that.
Well, we're directly in the middle of that. We have a MasterCard carbon calculator today. So at the end of the month, when you get your bill and you have the line items of everything you bought and the total financial impact, you have the line items of everything you bought and the estimated carbon impact. But to your point, where do we get that estimated carbon impact? It comes from a third-party economy. They rely on the Allen Index. It's pretty high level, right? It's at the sector level. Like you bought an airline ticket. It needs to get to the merchant level. You bought a British Airways ticket to the actual SKU level. You bought a British Airways ticket from London to Australia, to Sydney, on economy class in a 777 or whatever it is. So there's a lot of work here. So what we're talking about, the change we need to create, I think, has to happen so fast compared to, how we've built up the way we live today. So there's some tight timelines involved in what we need to do. So how are you all working to accelerate against, the clock is ticking?
I'm just going to, I can't resist, only because you mentioned that. So when Brompton was little, we had no money, obviously. And I'm 6'4", and we were trying to buy things from all over the world and sell little bikes all over the world. So I spent most of my time traveling like a cricket in economy, because I'm quite tall, with my knees around my ears. Japan, Taiwan, you name it. Anyway, I got quite used to it. So we fly economy. And actually, we've got quite big now as a company. We still fly economy. And it saves us quite a lot of money. But the great thing is now, I can say to the young staff who come from these fancy companies where, of course, if it's business, you fly business class, that none of us would ever fly business class on holiday because it's a total rip-off. But now I can say, no, we can't fly business class because that's 3 seats. That's 3 times the carbon footprint. So it's got nothing to do with the 700 grand I save a year by our staff flying economy. It's all to do with our carbon footprint. So you can take a little something to MasterCard and suggest to them that all the execs travel economy rather than business to save on their carbon footprint. It's a masterstroke. Anyway, just a little story.
Well, I will add to that. We report, we have the data, right, of what the carbon is of the flights that we take. That's part of how we're calculating our own footprint. Yeah. So there is strong awareness around all of those decisions, and we've been rolling out all sorts of tools. Particularly, like the example that I'm very focused on is we're headquartered in New York. People have to go to Washington, D.C. often. There are trains to Washington, D.C. that you can take. You do not need to take a plane. So I'm with you on the strategies here. There are many of them, and we're working through our procurement process. But back to how are you accelerating this change?
Through innovation, I suppose. We can't keep going around and trying to pretend that the existing system, like within the existing system, can create like this breakthrough change. So as we're working on the business as usual within the traditional manufacturing systems and looking into all this material innovation, blah, blah, like usual, a lot of investment and efforts go into that space. But then we had to actually like completely break through, zoom out, and say like, let's just start from the beginning. How the shoes were made in the first place. So we ended up going to deep to the Kalahari Desert, to the jungles of Borneo, to north of Canada, working with the indigenous communities and learning So this has all started relearning how we're supposed to move naturally, first of all. Yeah, this is because it's all about like bringing back your natural movement. Because from birth now in the West, everybody wears all sorts of footwear, and we actually can't move properly how we're supposed to move. We are like evolutionary biology outcomes. Yeah, like we whatever happened in the last 150 years has not. We're not adapted so quickly to change this to this modern environment. So surely the way how we move is we need to bring it back again. But like how? Through natural movement, and what does it mean? And then we started breaking down how the shoes are made nowadays, all like traditional sizing based on a Western sizing system. And then it goes on, and then hence the orthopedic and the foot surgery, whatever, all this foot-related illnesses industry is $3.5 billion a year, with all sorts of operations involved. And it's not supposed to be the case. It's like we're supposed to be running long distance, super healthy and steady, no problem, because we evolved as persistent hunters. And then now, like with all the sedentary cushion lifestyle, we're like messing it up really badly. So basically, the long story short, we ended up working with indigenous communities in different parts of the world, learning about the movement, but then we ended up looking into what sort of footwear they were or used to make, because they're all disappearing very fast, and looking into traditional craftsmanship. So basically, the logic is like, in olden days, shoes were made from local materials, foot by foot, person by person. You go to your local cobbler, he makes you something, then you wear it probably for 1/3 of your life, the same pair of sandals or something that would get repaired and other. So how, and then it was so simple and no-brainer, like because the perfect, like the innovation or the best technologies that would ever go into your shoe is actually your own foot anyways. It's like 100,000 nervous endings, the same as your hands. You have most amount of bones down there, and then literally your whole well-being based on the health of your feet. So, and now how we can connect it 2 by 2 together? Like obviously it's quite romanticized vision. Okay, these shoes used to be made this way, but like how do we do it now? And this is when the technology comes in. So we. In the last almost 6 years, we were working on this made-to-measure, scan-to-print personalized footwear, which is now currently launched, and it's all from literal scan of your feet. We analyzed 1.3 million people's feet to come up with a basically generative design system that creates something perfect for your own like bodily anatomy and for your own use, because everybody has their own interest. Yeah, like somebody really into yoga, somebody would be more into running. So, and then from there, the big elephant in the room was the materials, because everything for 3D printing, we talked to a lot of chemical companies that were not interested, saying there is no consumer demand or whatever the fancy language people use. And then, and we presented that in some material innovation conference, basically saying there is no material and we don't really know like how to go about it. And then, bam, 3 years later, a young guy comes in and says, I heard you guys talk about this problem, I have a solution. And now this biomaterial exists now, and then there is a whole manufacturing going on in Ireland, all super localized. But then it required shit tons of perseverance and not giving up, because it does require a lot of investment. You never know if it's going to work. But then what's the point of trying to repeat the same thing within the system that is not obsolete whatsoever? So.
You know, I mean, what you're talking about, right? This is the tip of the spear, right? You all are forging kind of new markets, new models in your businesses. So, I don't know, SoFire, in terms of breakthroughs or wins, like what are each of you, and this is kind of the last formal question, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, but what are you kind of most proud of? What's been either surprising or breakthrough as you're forging these new models?
What a question for me to answer on the spot. I think I spoke to the thing I'm most proud of earlier on when I was talking about the fact that this is a movement that's spread completely by word of mouth. If you do, much like Will was saying, if you do create something useful and joyful, we use the two, people will spread it for you. And I think I've just been most proud that that's happened. And then we've managed to crack the replicability of what we do. So over the last 5 years, we've really zoned in on how do we make this something that can live in any community that wants one, that isn't dependent on volunteers, doesn't drain people, is regenerative in the communities that it's in. And that's now possible. So any community that wants to have a library of things can now have one. It can be a citywide model, and that's what it is here in London. And there's demand from all the major cities in Europe and plenty in the US as well to do this. And I think that's just a real proof point that people are waking up to the fact that, I think it's over 80% of household items are used less than once a month. It makes no sense for us to own those things. And cities, governments, communities are all now able to have a library of things.
Fantastic.
So in terms of consumer growth, customer growth and so on.
Anything that you are kind of most proud of, because you're disrupting models, right? So what's working? Where's your big win? What are you most proud of?
I think, or just what made us really happy as a business is I think people know, like, particularly in the fashion industry, and a lot of people running fashion businesses are fully aware of the challenges that the fashion industry represents to the environment. And not only do they know, they actually all want to do something about it. And that was probably slightly surprising, but also made us, quite happy that as a very small business, we're pushing on very open doors, because everyone's just looking for a solution that means that they can sleep at night. And I think we hadn't anticipated that. We thought that, you kind of have the big bad fat cats that are working in these big industries, and I'm sure there are a few of them out there. But generally, when we're out and about talking to people about what we do, we offer our tech on a B2B basis. So we work with brands like Anya Hindmarsh and Burberry, and at the higher end, and then more mass market with people like Karen Millen. And, we're really happy to be engaging with those more fast fashion brands to ensure that those items are also in circulation for longer. Completely take your point on the durability. If you can encourage fast fashion to perhaps approach it in a slightly different way, because you can prove to them that they can make money out of making more durable products that can be in circulation for longer, that actually does lead you in a really good place. I think the statistic in the sharing economy, I came from car sharing originally, and it's that for every one car shared, 11 are taken off the street. So in any of the businesses that we're talking about, that does have a huge impact very quickly. So there are green shoots of hope out there.
Fantastic. Will?
Yeah, we about to hit 50 years, and it was a long and slow start, as often these things are, but we sold our millionth bike a few years back. So we're getting there, but we don't spend too much time being proud, because we're beating ourselves up about where we've got to try and get to, and it always takes a bit long, and we haven't got there fast enough. But if we're talking more broadly based upon the topic up there, I do think the fundamental problem is the point you made earlier about growth. We've got a sort of capitalist model globally that unless you're growing, unless you're making more profit, you're somehow failing. And until we face up to that, we are not going to get, this is not going to work, because it doesn't matter, even if you spend your money on more experience, we've got to consume less on every level to be sustainable. Even if we're spending it on experiences, the experiences in themselves, have other things going on. So I think we haven't quite clicked that now we are growing because we're trying to replace a 2.5-ton square metal box with a 10-kilo bicycle for transport in cities. So we feel we need to grow to get things better. But it's not, our ambition isn't to keep growing forever. We want to get to a place, and then we've done our job and sustainably stay there. But that's just not in the world today. So if we were going to do anything, we need to start raising the question about growth and this obsession with shareholder value, increased profit, and growth. And until we can face up to that, I'm afraid we haven't really faced up to sustainability on planet Earth.
Yeah, Doma, in terms of your biggest win, what do you see?
Can I talk to what you just said?
You can, although we will have to this is our last
No, this is one of the
question.
big things that we think a lot as a family, what is the growth looks like. And I think just generally all this GDP and the way how we measure things, even carbon, everything seems flawed. What is the life, like the life and the joy that needs to be created in the first place, and the way how we measure things is skews everything up. I think we just like fundamentally everything needs to be reviewed. I don't know, like that's why I left my career in policy, human rights, and all that. Like, no, thank you very much. This is like this, and then one thing that we deliberate or philosophize a lot on this, biodiversity of life. The reason planet has been flourishing until we came up and started doing all the things we're doing. Biodiversity, that's what created this like abundance of life. Yeah. So what if like we looked at businesses through biodiversity lens? That's why like I was thinking like, okay, like you've got all this monopoly of all sorts of massive companies, but then you have all these small to medium companies that usually now, not like this generation, coming up with tons of amazing mission like oriented, yes, social mission or environmental mission aligned companies. And where are those in the middle? Like we can name Patagonia, perhaps, this soap, Bronner's company, and then who else? Like what happened? Where are the rest? So like how we can, this sort of Brompton's Vivos and people, like how we can create this like next level of like, yeah, exactly, like all these funds and,
Can I come back
and then they try to dilute the mission and stuff. There is an amazing study came out from a German think tank. It's all about like preserving the mission for the long run. And then like what are the legislation, this structural financial system that needs to be set up behind, because it can't be just be, dependent on the founder. Yeah, like when you're gone, like somebody else gonna come. Like, how do you know that it's gonna be protected in the long run? And the money, it's like, yeah. So very scary. So if we don't change that, then I feel like by finding the others, how we call it, like our mini Pokemon Go game, trying to find all the founders and congregating together and trying to come up with like perhaps a legislative change would be great. I don't know how to do it yet, but this kind of studies help. And then there's definitely amazing, like sort of family offices and like people interested, this next generation, people like super interested in like supporting projects like this. And just this kind of things gives me a lot of hope. And yeah.
Wonderful. Quick comment.
I just wanted to layer on top of that because we thought about it a lot. I wouldn't call ourselves a startup anymore, but we were very, very conscious of what our legacy was going to be and how could we were anti-VC money. We didn't want to take on that because it doesn't have the right incentives if you're working with communities. So we explored and experimented with a lot of different governance setups. I don't know if this is most interesting to people in the room, but we developed a mission-locked business. So there's no hierarchy between our angel investors, our impact investors, and the planet, our communities, our partners, and our members. And they're all part of the same ecosystem. And we congregate them in a very dynamic way so that we can create these confluences of interest rather than conflicts of interest. And I think I wish I had the space to say earlier that actually one of the things I'm most proud of is thinking about doing business differently right from almost day zero so that it doesn't then become an issue 10, 15 years down the line when someone wants to buy you or all these kind of, I think personally, we have no necessarily idea of selling library of things at any point. This thing needs to exist. It needs to exist in perpetuity. So how do we make sure that happens beyond the life of my involvement in Library of Things? So that was a really important part for us, and yeah.
Fantastic.
I think a really important thing for lots of people to consider from an early stage.
I mean, so many ideas. You're breaking models. Like you said, we were reinventing a new way for the world, to live in harmony. So I think this work is so important. As I mentioned, this is the future. I talked about our model for this transition, inspire, inform, and I said there were 3 pillars. I didn't get to the third. So very briefly, the third is enable. It is this pathway to action, right? And I think that is what you all are doing, is you're enabling that. In fact, yesterday, we just launched our first ever urban mobility hub. And one of the products that we're really excited about is related to Will's business, where in terms of urban mobility, having more people do bike sharing is a good thing, right? But what's the thing you hate about bike sharing, right? You go to try to get on the bike. I'm in London, I live in California. I want to get on a bike to come here. oh, I have to download an app. I don't have this app. I have the app for the San Francisco bike share. So, okay, 20 minutes later, once I figured it out, entered my payments and all that stuff. In our urban mobility hub yesterday, we showed, in partnership with a startup company, you just tap your MasterCard on the back of the bike, there's a little thing, and literally 5 seconds later, you get on the bike. You don't have to download the app.
I like the sound of that.
Right?
We have a bike hire scheme. Right? We're talking.
Yeah.
Come
Well,
on.
and look, we did it here in London. You guys, anybody take the tube here? Yeah, yeah. Well, guess what you did? Hopefully, you just tapped your MasterCard. Hopefully, you had a MasterCard, and you got right on. You didn't get your Oyster card, stand in that line. Wait, where am I going? Wait, what do I need? I'm only here for 5 days. Should I get the month thing? Should I get? You don't have to do that. So we're looking at how do we take the friction out of transit and make it easier to choose the bike share or the EV charger where we're putting the credit card in the car, so when the car goes, anyway, lots to talk about. But the point is, this is the future. You are the future merchants, kind of reinventing how we need to live and work. So what a pleasure to share the stage with you. We're opening it up for questions. I unfortunately have to run to another London Climate Action Week. I hope your Action Week is as filled with as much action as mine. But thank you so much to the Extreme Hangouts team for having us here. These are the conversations we need to be having, and it was a pleasure to be with you today.
So questions from the audience. Guy, you're straight in there.
So there seems to be a bit of like a confusion around growth and how that works. And I was just sort of thinking about it just now. And like our bodies, when we get to a certain height, we stop growing, and our bodies stop growing, but our minds and our consciousness hopefully continues growing until we die. And I guess in a tree, an oak tree, it grows to its natural proper height, and then it stops growing. But other stuff starts happening. It deepens its connection with all of the species around it once it's reached its physical height. So maybe it's like companies have to grow, like nature. They have to grow and grow and grow and grow until they reach their right size, and then they can start to do good in the world and go further beyond their limited means. But how do we know once you've reached your mature size?
Unfortunately, that doesn't work in the current world because you have investors that are always looking for growth. So it's a bit like a Ponzi scheme. You'd be sort of saying, well, you can keep investing until because the investor keeps wanting growth. So the last tranche of investors, just before you hit your optimum size, you didn't tell them, you didn't say, oh, well, actually, you're investing but we're not going to grow anymore. So our current model of floating IPO, VC, it just doesn't seem to allow for that. There's this obsession. And then what happens is, as you rightly say, a business hits its optimum size, but the management team are under this ludicrous pressure to start doing stupid things to pretend it's growing when it's not, or start doing odd things. And then it all comes tumbling down, and what could have been a nice, optimum size, sustainable business probably overreaches itself and crashes and burns and starts doing nasty things to the environment to try and keep growing when it shouldn't be growing anymore. But the sort of ownership structure keeps forcing people to keep growing forever. I don't know.
That's why resist it if you can. Don't take money from the likes of VCs. There needs to be other ways of accessing capital. There needs to be different buyers other than individuals. That can be governments. They're one of the biggest buyers of products and services around the world. I don't put too much faith in them, but they are another way of doing it. And I like to think that we have no ambition to grow beyond a certain number of people at Library of Things. And we've said that from a very early stage. So instead, what we do is partner and collaborate. And a bit like the analogy you were bringing in with nature, start to share resources. And that allows for a different type of growth. Like you say, it deepens the pathways and connections between us rather than making one of you grow taller than the other. And I think that's a really important thing for anyone doing anything in business to try and design in as early as possible.
Okay, I wanted to just kind of carry on that theme because it's something I'm thinking about a lot. And it's connected to even the word economy. and how we're always told that, you know, the economy has to be strong, and I just always hear that word and I question what is even my understanding of economy and how we're all told that the economy is like this. And most people don't know really how economies work. And I don't know, I just really feel like young people now, the best things they can be learning are maybe philosophy and economics, to learn actually where those systems started out. A little bit like you going back to the way you go back to how shoes were designed. For me, every time I hear growth or business, even the word business, it makes me kind of really, really awkward. And Sophia, while I'm here in the room with you, my brother actually works for a library, so a library in Camden. And he's a very grumpy guy. And he's always saying, oh, the library of things. So it's interesting, because I just thought, I'm always defending the library of things, but he doesn't like it, because he says you still have to pay for those things, and a library is a place where you go and you get a book, and you don't pay for it. So he feels like it still belongs to that kind of model of, it's a business, right? And so I defend you because I feel like you say. I don't know what my question is. I just wanted to really say thank you, and I am on that line about being against the word growth and wanting to question that, and how can we? But also, the Library of Things almost exists on my street at the moment in a WhatsApp group where neighbours share things between each other. So it's just my question, how could you potentially make the Library of Things work in a different way? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've tested so many different models, and I hope that's your brother's only grumble with Library of Things. No, we do feel that acutely in terms of trying to make it as affordable as possible, but it still has to wash its face. We're not in it for profit, but it still needs to work. And if you think of money sometimes as just like energy flow, then actually if we made it free, and we've tested, can we make it free? But people don't value it in the same way, and so they don't take care of it. So it needs to be a nominal amount. It doesn't need to be a loads, but it needs to be enough for it to work as a system, as an ecosystem, and for people to care about it and look after it. So there's some sort of like meeting between idealism and pragmatism that we have to embrace internally at Library of Things. I can't remember the second part. Sorry, about growth. Yeah, I don't know if others want to jump in around growth, but I do talk a lot about how do we make sure that it's responsible growth and pragmatic growth. But that's only because I'm using language that already exists. If I didn't have to, I wouldn't. I would use more natural language about flourishing and, you know, how do we make sure things that blossom in the right way. And I'm trying to actually reprogram myself, and I'm kind of cringing at the fact that I've just said that word, reprogram, but you know, to use more natural language in the place of very mechanical language. When we talk about, okay, business might not be the right word, but how we exchange energy and intention and opportunities, and make sure that we all live and work in the way that we want. And the word economy used to mean home. You know, economia is, I don't know if everyone knows, but that's what it was. And so it used to include the work that was done at home. And what we've done is we've made it all the work that happens outside of home. So yeah, I'm very interested on a personal level on how do we make sure we see that full picture.
Just to say, I wouldn't be afraid of growth, because the world is a bit of an interesting transition. And I mean, it sounds a little bit dramatic to say there are good companies and there are bad companies, and it isn't as black and white as that. And we're certainly far from perfect. There are all sorts of things we should be doing better, but there are some people doing some pretty awful stuff. So the way we look at it is we have to be furiously profitable by being good. Because then if we can demonstrate that we can grow, we can be profitable by being nice, then all these other companies, because they don't really care about being good or being nice, but if they can see profit, and they think, oh, the companies that are nice and good make more profit. Oh, sod all those, let's all put our money into these companies. But then you've still, at some point, got to face up to the fact that you can't keep growing forever. But that'll come later. The first thing we've got to do is get the good companies, I may say good in inverted commas, to be more successful, more profitable, faster growth than all the nasty companies. And then the capital will come rushing over here. At the moment, there's a battle, I understand, between Shell and BP. BP is trying to transition and its profits are going down because it's transitioning. Shell has said, sod it. We're just going to make shed loads. Who cares? And it'll be interesting to see which one wins. One hopes in this weird world we live in, maybe BP in a weird world is probably, of the two, the one that floats higher. But, it's not straightforward.
If I could just ask a question. So I have been a businesswoman and in organizational culture and sustainability in both government and business for 40 years. And a lot of people think they're passé, but I use the UN Sustainable Development Goals as sort of a plan for the world, really, because they do encompass growth to a certain extent, but only growth that is appropriate and good. And I am a customer of yours, Dilma, and I obviously understand all of your others, and I'm a huge fan of the Library of Things. But what we really need is the collaboration of everybody, and that's what's missing. It's all the short-termism, I think, and I just wondered how you guys and everyone else that you're connected with have a plan going forward with whoever's going to be in the new government, because we just can't carry on this with the short-term siloed approach. So my question to you is, who are you going to reach out to next so that we get to the end of our consumerism, which should actually be more about less consumerism, obviously, or just the doing of good things that are as repurposed as possible or as natural as possible, using natural materials, and more biodiversity.
We're part of B Corp community, but it's not growing fast enough. And I think in the US, it's even like numbers. Like it used to be big in the US, and now UK is actually seems like overtaking by the amount of companies becoming B Corp. But B Corp also flawed in its own way. Quite a lot of service-oriented companies get B Corp labeled very quickly, while people like us, or I don't know if Brompton, are you B Corp? Yeah, for us who are producing physical items is way more complicated. So it's like definitely not apple-to-apple comparison. So that makes me like, okay, that's so difficult. And anyhow, and we do quite a lot. Like we do. One of the main sort of principles that we have is all about transparency and accountability, because there is no, we know that we're working with an existing system, and we know there's a lot of, our favorite section of our annual reporting is fantastic failures. And that's when we go around saying, okay, like these 10 incredible things didn't work out. But then at the same time, I love working with philosophers, I suppose. There is a writer called Giles Hutchins, and we've been working with him for 3 or 4 years. Now he's launching a whole new book on leading by nature. That's when we go around and invite business leaders, and then we go and sit in the woods and share pains and hopes at the same time. Yeah, and then it's but I do, but that's also at the same time not enough. Because I know, like, we're trying to stand up against the multi-billion company, and then it's also related to culture as well. Like fashion, why footwear made this way? It's a very specific reason. Like these pointy shoes came from horse riding. So it was literally made for very quick getting on a horse, and the high heels, or the heels, were created to stop the shoe falling off from the stirrup, basically. And then from there, it's all evolved into the high fashion that you see now, which is like destroying people's feet, basically. It's like so fascinating to see this history of things, but also meeting business leaders. But I do think the problem of not having enough social, environmental-oriented businesses like that reach scale, it's a big global issue, yeah? Like, we can't be sitting here and just saying we've got basically one Patagonia that we can name from top of our head, and then where are all the others? So I just
on a positive note, I would say on a positive note that as sharing economy founders or founders that are very aware of sustainability issues, we're much more likely to collaborate and work with other companies in a way that the guys that perhaps founded these big conglomerates, it wouldn't have crossed their minds, 20 years ago to think about collaborating with a competitor. So in my wardrobe, we've already absorbed or worked with 4 different rental businesses. One of them had the most amazing CEO who was clearly so much better at the fashion game than I could ever be. She's French, she speaks fluent Italian, she can sit in front of Prada and Chanel and onboard them as brand partners in a way that I know as a middle-aged English woman I'm never going to be able to do. And so I think that's really positive within the area that we sit, is that we can collaborate and we can work together, and by virtue of doing that, perhaps accelerate to getting to that bigger status more quickly, because I can't see any other route.
I think that is a perfect moment to wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming to the Extreme Hangout today. Thank you all also for being here. This is it for this room now. We've got to get everybody, or invite everybody to move through for our last panel today, which is going to be about the state of the UK's rivers and our coastal waters. So if you're an ocean lover like me, please come and join us out in the garden, where we can sip tea together and enjoy the beautiful scenery at the wonderful Ladbroke Hall. So thank you all so much for being here.